I challenge you, I'm curious, in your worldview, in the ideal Islamic country, would you allow people to draw pictures of the Prophet? Would you allow people to practice whatever religion they want?
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I've stumbled across this absolutely wild debate between Hijab, who's a Muslim apologist, and Destiny, who's arguing from the atheist and liberal perspective. And let me tell you, this gets heated. They're going head to head on whether Islam or secularism provides a better foundation for society. And Destiny asks some questions that Hijab really struggles to answer, especially when it comes to whether an Islamic society would actually allow the freedoms we take for granted in the West. So make sure you watch until the end, and please comment down below where you're watching from. I really love to see people from all over the world connecting in here. All right, now let's get into the video.
Sure? Well, that was a bit of a mouthful, Bonelli. But you're going to have to swallow your pride and concede the debate, because actually, he has not been able to connect the dots, unfortunately, for himself. This is a debate about Islam and atheism, not Islam and liberalism, okay? He is assuming a liberal framework. Liberalism does not necessarily connect with atheism in any way whatsoever. Itself, liberalism needs proof and justification for its own truth, which we can do in maybe another debate. I don't think you're going to be wanting to do any other debates after this. But the fact of the matter is this. He says Muslim countries, that's his big question. Where are the Muslim countries? I agree with you. Muslim countries are not following Islam. This is the answer to your question. They are not following. Muslim countries are not following. Look at the Palestine issue. There are non-Muslim countries who have done a better job than the Muslim countries with the Palestine issue. They've acted more Islamic than the Muslim countries have. I agree with this criticism. We are not talking about that. As he's talking about execution and this and that. How dare you talk about execution? You are speaking to the IDF, telling them, if you're going to commit atrocities, don't bring your phone out. You are in no position whatsoever to talk about rights to us today. No position. Zero. Your sanctimony is gone, and you are finished, I'm sorry to say.
As much as the fellow speaker wants to paint me as a Zionist Israeli person, I've never given a speech to the IDF. I don't think they would much want my advice or my criticisms. Not a fan of Netanyahu, never have been. We can get into that later if you'd like. You're talking about the ability to connect atheism to liberal society, and you're saying that I'm simply begging that I'm simply asserting that it must be true for one liberal society to exist, that there must be some atheist foundation. But I guess my question to you would be, how could you have a foundation to a society that is some kind of religion that also allots for other religions to practice themselves in identical ways? When religions tend to be mutually exclusive, especially the Abrahamic ones, when they say that my holy book, my scripture, my God, my interpretation is the correct one, how do you truly have a society where you allow for other people to practice their religious beliefs? I challenge you, I'm curious, in your worldview, in the ideal Islamic country, would you allow people to draw pictures of the Prophet? Would you allow people to practice whatever religion they want? Would you allow people to do things that, so long as they comport with the basic laws that we all agree on when it comes to, things like don't steal, don't murder, don't do, obvious crimes we all agree on? Would you allow in your ideal Islamic society all of these other religions to practice in the same way that in a liberal society, in an atheist society, in a secularly built society, other religions are able to practice?
He asked me a series of questions, and he said that, would you allow the drawing of the Prophet? Would you allow this? Would you allow that? In the same way as liberal societies. Why should it be the same way? You haven't proven liberalism is true, and you haven't proven that atheism is true. You've given us no arguments for anything. And then he says, free speech. Well, it's very interesting he mentions free speech, because I'm going through some of his content, and he was making an argument for child. And he, in fact, said that there's a pragmatic case for child. So, yes, the Muslim countries would actually ban something like that. And that is an inhibition to the free speech people like you, atheist morality, would bring to the table. Child banned in the Muslim countries, for example. Maybe that will put you in trouble or this and that, because I know you sent some pictures to that person, whatever. I don't know what's going on. I'm surprised you're even here today, so quite frankly. I was thinking whether or not I should humiliate you, but I was worried that maybe you enjoy it. It's over here, man. You haven't answered any of my questions. I'm asking you, how do you connect atheist morality with liberalism. There is no answer, there's no connection. So all of your subsequent questions are a waste of time because you are a puny, perverse, yes, I'm sorry to say puny, perverse, pro-genocide, pipsqueak of an individual. This is the case. And there's nothing more to be said about you.
This is the moment where everything collapses for Hijab, because he just got challenged on whether Islamic society would actually allow the freedoms that he's enjoying right now in this debate. And instead of answering, he pivots to philosophy. He says he is assuming a liberal framework. Liberalism does not necessarily connect with atheism in any way whatsoever. And you know what that tells me? That tells me he can't defend his governance model on its own merits. He has to pretend the question isn't about comparing different systems. It's pure deflection. But then comes the really interesting admission. He says, Muslim countries are not following Islam. This is the answer to your question. Let that sink in for a second. He's basically saying that every Muslim majority country on earth right now has failed to implement what he considers true Islam. Saudi Arabia, not real Islam. Iran, not real Islam. Pakistan, not real Islam apparently. This is the exact same logic we see with other ideologies. It's never the system that's flawed, it's just that nobody has implemented it correctly in 14 centuries. If an ideology can't be successfully implemented even once in over 1,000 years, maybe we should question whether the issue is with implementation or with the system itself. And here's where Hijab loses the debate tactically. When pressed about how his ideal society would handle dissent and criticism, he deflects by attacking Destiny personally instead of addressing the actual question. This is a classic debate technique when someone doesn't have a good answer. The reality is that many countries that attempt to govern based primarily on religious principles do restrict certain freedoms we take for granted in the West. That's just observable fact. So rather than engage with that reality, he changes the subject. The most important question came from Destiny, when he asked, how could you have a foundation to a society that is some kind of religion that also allows for other religions to practice themselves in identical ways? This is the question that advocates of religious governance struggle with. Because when you build a government system on one specific religious framework, by definition, you're creating a hierarchy. That religious framework becomes the supreme law, which means other belief systems operate within boundaries set by that dominant religion. You can have tolerance, you can have protections, but true equality where all belief systems have identical status, that's extremely difficult to achieve in a religiously based system. So when Destiny asks this question, Hijab doesn't really have a good answer. He can't claim equal treatment without contradicting the premise of religious law. So instead, he just avoids engaging with the question directly.
I would have prepared more personal insults if I knew that was the direction we were taking this, but okay. Again, I will say, you're saying that I haven't connected atheism to a liberal society, but I notice that you failed to answer my question of what types of behaviors would you allow in your model Islamic society without having the foundation as some secular system, without being able to point to laws, without being able to point to a system of governance that doesn't originate from some holy book. I don't know how you can say that a liberal society, one that allows for all religions to practice equally, isn't necessarily a society that doesn't take a normative position on what religion is true or what religion is false. Again, there is a reason why you have come to this country, and while you might insult me and call me a lot of names, which funny enough is an indication that the person doesn't feel confident in the material, I guess, that they're talking about, you have the right to do that, and you're able to do that here as I don't know if you were born in this country, if you're an immigrant to this country, and I think that's a beautiful thing. I don't think that you would be able to get away with the same type of behavior in the countries that you seem to want to model this one or other Western countries out of. Again, I ask you, if you think that there is a better way to build a country with an Islamic foundation, where where are these countries? It seems like they fell in the past. They haven't emerged again. If you're telling me that atheism is not the model or is not the foundation for a secular liberal society that allows for other religions to practice equally, well, then tell me, what is the religious foundation for that society? How can you have a society that allows for multiple religions to practice, all of them to be treated in an equal manner by the laws and the government, but say that that society takes some position on religion and that the society itself isn't atheist or isn't liberal? You brought up this idea earlier. It's funny, you used an analogy of a mother birthing herself or a child having two mothers. We can look, for instance, to children born today. That doesn't involve any religious aspect. It doesn't involve a God. It doesn't involve anything else. We know the process by how that works. We don't need religion right now to explain the things that are happening in society. For all the predictions that Muhammad or anybody else supposedly made about things in society, I don't see his name on any research papers. I haven't seen him publish anything in Nature or Science Weekly. I don't really know what his predictions are doing that are relevant today. I know that, he was the head of a bunch of caliphates or started these that eventually fell and no longer exist. So I'm just curious if in your push to have Islam be the model for Western society, again, where are these countries that you want to model, Western countries off of? And if my foundation for a liberal society is not an atheist one, then tell me, what religion am I pointing to in order to have the societies that exist?
Now watch what happens when Destiny doesn't let him off the hook. He points out, I noticed that you failed to answer my question of what types of behaviors would you allow in your model Islamic society. And that's exactly right. Hijab spent all that time critiquing liberalism and atheism, but he never actually described what his ideal society would look like in practice. Would there be freedom of speech, including criticism of religion? Would people be free to change their faith without consequences? Would women have completely equal rights in all areas of life? He avoided specifying any of this. And then Destiny makes a point that's really quite powerful. He says, I don't know how you can say that a liberal society, one that allows for all religions to practice equally, isn't necessarily a society that doesn't take a normative position on what religion is true or what religion is false. Think about what that means. A secular liberal society says, we're not going to enforce any particular religion on anyone. You're free to be Muslim, Christian, Jewish, atheist, Buddhist, Hindu, whatever you want. The government stays neutral on questions of religious truth. But a religiously based society can't do that. It must elevate one religious framework as the basis for its laws. That's literally what makes it a religious state rather than a secular one. So when Hijab critiques liberalism for needing justification, he's kind of missing the point. Liberalism's value isn't that it claims absolute truth. It's that it provides a framework where people with fundamentally different worldviews can live together peacefully. And we can observe that this actually works in practice. Then comes the challenge that really puts Hijab in a difficult position. Destiny asks, again, I ask you, if you think that there is a better way to build a country with an Islamic foundation, where are these countries? Where are they? If religious governance produces superior outcomes, we should be able to point to examples. But when we look at migration patterns, people are consistently moving from countries with religious governance to secular Western democracies. That's not an opinion. That's just demographic data. People vote with their feet, and they're choosing societies built on secular liberal principles. Here's what really highlights the inconsistency in Hijab's position. Muslims living in Western countries have the freedom to publicly argue that their religious worldview is correct and should be taken more seriously. They can advocate for their beliefs, build institutions, wear religious clothing, and critique the host society. That's all protected speech and religious freedom. But if you look at many countries governed primarily by Islamic law, you don't see the same reciprocal freedoms for people advocating secular values or other religions. The asymmetry is quite clear. Western secular societies extend freedoms even to those who critique secularism, but many religious governance systems don't extend similar freedoms to their critics. That's worth thinking about.
There's response to that. Now we move on to our next segment, which is immigration. Immigration across all the West. Its streets, its schools, its sense of self. For some, the diversity of English society, whereas for others, it is fractured. Some writers want cultural struggle ahead. For instance, commentator Douglas Murray argued that large-scale immigration could destroy European civilization. So my question to both of you: is multiculturalism destined to fail, and faith and freedom colliding? Destiny, let's start with
So I think that one of the fatal flaws that Western countries have made, especially the United States, is we don't really ask ourselves, what does it mean in my country to be an American? I think that there are good reasons to celebrate immigration. You can look at the numbers side, you can look at the economic impacts, the fiscal impacts, the impacts to business and everything else, and you would say, well, immigration is beneficial there. You can look at certain aspects of culture and say that we're enriched when it comes to foods or entertainments or arts, and you say there's an enrichment there. But what does it mean to actually be an American? What is the core base of values that all of us should be sharing? When I look at countries in the West today, especially after the Syrian refugee crisis, especially 2013 onwards, especially post-Brexit in the United Kingdom, I feel like we haven't come together in a long time in a lot of these countries, especially in mine. I can't speak as much for yours, but we haven't come together and asked ourselves, what does it mean to be a member of our nation, and what kind of values should we be looking for from people that are coming to our nation? Again, I will, hearkening back to the last subject, I like the concept of liberalism as a secular government because as long as we share some core values that we're all working and building towards, some concept of a nation that we're working and building towards, liberalism provides a lot of different paths to get there. A Muslim like Mamdani in New York can be the mayor of New York City, which is a wonderful thing. We have evangelical Christians in the United States. I would say that they're less wonderful things, but I'm glad that they have the right to exist. We have secular atheists. We've got Zionists and non-Zionist Jews. We've got all sorts of different types of people that can exist under this umbrella, all working towards a common goal. I think that when you have people that are proponents of immigration, I think that it's good to take a step back sometimes and think, well, what do we want our country to look like? What kind of people should we want to come here? And that doesn't just mean people that look or think like us. It means people that are building towards some kind of common goal. And I think for people that are harshly critical of immigration, I think it's good for them to ask the same question. Do I want nobody coming here because they don't look like me or because they don't think exactly like me? And what kind of restrictions would I draw on immigrants coming here that I wouldn't also restrict on my own countrymen? I notice sometimes in the United States, for instance, that a lot of conservatives will talk about how we want to restrict immigration from people that have A, B, and C or X, Y, and Z thoughts that they feel like aren't aligned with American values. But I would point to a lot of conservatives in the United States, and I would say that your disregard for rule of law or the Constitution doesn't align with our values. So I think that if you're going to have a view on immigration, I think that you should have first a view on what your nation is and what it looks like, and then you should try to incorporate more and more people as long as you're building towards that final project or vision.
So now we're transitioning into immigration, and this is where things get really interesting because Destiny makes a point that I think Western countries have genuinely failed to address properly. He asks, what does it mean in my country to be an American? What is the core base of values that all of us should be sharing? And this is the conversation that's been missing. We've been so focused on celebrating diversity that we sometimes forget to ask what actually binds us together as a society. What are the non-negotiable values that everyone who comes here should agree to? Look at what's happened in parts of Europe. There are communities where integration has clearly struggled, where different value systems are clashing, where some people feel their basic freedoms are being restricted by community pressure. That's not sustainable. And it happened because European leaders were afraid to clearly articulate what their societies stand for and what they expect from newcomers. When Destiny says, I like the concept of liberalism as a secular government because as long as we share some core values that we're all working and building towards some concept of a nation, he's identifying something really important. Immigration works best when people are coming to genuinely join the society, to embrace its core values while maintaining their cultural identity. Immigration tends to create problems when people try to transplant the exact same cultural and political systems from their home countries into their new home. And this is where immigration from very religiously conservative regions can present unique challenges. For many people from these backgrounds, religion functions differently than it does for, say, American Christians or Jews. It's not just about personal faith and worship. It's an integrated system that includes legal codes, political principles, and social organization. When immigrant communities advocate for parallel legal systems based on religious law, or when they push for restrictions on speech that criticizes their faith, that creates genuine tension with liberal democratic values. It's worth acknowledging that tension honestly. Now, does this mean every person from these regions holds these views? Obviously not. But research does show that certain values that conflict with liberal democracy are held by meaningful percentages of some immigrant communities. Views about freedom of conscience, equality across different groups, and freedom of expression can differ significantly based on someone's background. That's just what the data shows, and it's something we need to be able to discuss openly. Destiny asks, do I want nobody coming here because they don't look like me or because they don't think exactly like me? And I think that's exactly the right framing. This conversation isn't about ethnicity, appearance, or even personal religious practice. It's about fundamental civic values. If someone coming from any country genuinely embraces freedom of speech, freedom of religion, equality under the law, and democratic governance, then their background shouldn't matter. But if someone wants to immigrate while holding values that actively contradict those principles, that's a legitimate concern worth addressing. Not because of prejudice, but because societies need some shared foundation to function. The West needs to be more honest about this. Different value systems produce different types of societies. Some societies create conditions that people flee from. Other societies create conditions that people risk everything to reach. If we want to remain the kind of place people aspire to live, we need to be thoughtful about what values we expect and how we support genuine integration. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.